when we are going to share our message with people, it's more than facts. We need to share a story.
Are there some techniques or best practices on how to prepare the best for the public speaking?
Begin with the end in mind. What do you want your audience to do as a result of listening to you?
How to engage your audience right there in the moment as you're doing presentation.
I don't think anybody says, oh gosh, I wish that meeting would have been longer. No, they say, oh, I wish that would have been short. Could have been so much better if it was shorter. Every morning you look in the mirror and you give yourself a high five. You got this. You got it going on. Look in the mirror and tell yourself, I love you. You're amazing.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Lyoshin podcast. Today's guest is Leslie Fiorenzo. She's a business presentation coach who helps people develop public speaking skills and master the art of networking and also overcome self-promotion challenges. Hi, Leslie. Nice to have you here.
It's great to be here, Veet. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, sure. So I invited you to talk about public speaking and presentation skills and also interviewing skills and also how people can start developing those skills.
Sure.
But before we jump into the topic, could you please tell a little bit about your professional journey and the work that you do now?
Certainly. So I spent much of my career in the field of employee assistance programming as an account manager and business development professional. So worked a lot with HR prior to joining an EAP. I was in the human resources field in a manufacturing company. So that's pretty much where I started my career and spent a lot of my time doing public speaking, educating employee groups, educating HR people, and encouraging people to call the EAP whenever they had a life issue. So talked on a variety of subjects in that particular arena, specifically managing stress, substance abuse, those kinds of, all related to the helping profession and all EAP related. But I realized that I had a passion for it and helping people improve their skills. I'm certain that you, as well as the audience members, have sat through a number of boring presentations. People are well-intended. They just don't know what they don't know. And when we are going to share our message with people, it's more than facts. We need to share a story. Stories stick. We remember stories. And even if you have data that you want to share, you can wrap it in a story so people remember it. So that's what I'm on a mission to help coaches, consultants, and business leaders do, is share their message in an impactful way and help them have the confidence to get out there and share it.
I see. Yeah, understand. And yeah, it's very interesting how sometimes people, maybe they're new, maybe not, but those presentations sometimes are really boring and weird. So my first question would be, what are some of the basic public speaking techniques people can apply when they just starting, when they don't know anything yet?
Well, practice is important, and practice in terms of helping you get comfortable. So there's a saying, you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. For many, stepping in front of a group or pushing record to make a video or going on live on Facebook or LinkedIn, those things are very uncomfortable. So reframe that message in your head. So as opposed to saying, oh, I'm so nervous about this, I am so excited. Because you probably know, Veet, that nervousness and excitement land the same way, or your body doesn't know the difference. So sweaty palms, racing heart, yes, it could be the result of nervousness, but it could also be the result of excitement. Are you a roller coaster fan at all?
No, I actually don't really like them.
Don't even, okay. Well,
Yeah,
people
I'm
who
opposite.
are or do things that thrill seek, like jumping out of perfectly good airplanes, all of those things, before those events occur, there's some anticipation and we get a little revved up, if you will, in our system. Same thing happens when we step out on stage. So we want to reframe it. That's my initial thing, is think about what story you're making up about why you can't do something and reframe the story, because you can. I don't think anyone's ever died from stepping in front of a group. They may felt like they were, but if I can reframe it as, number one, I'm super excited to be here. Number two, my audience wants to hear from me. And even if I make a mistake, a lot of people are afraid, oh, I'll forget what I'm going to say, or they don't know, they won't like me, although those kinds of messages. First of all, they will, because they're paying to hear from you, right? If you are getting paid to speak, especially, your audience is there because they want to hear your message. Okay, you're not getting paid to speak. Still, people are tuning into you, or they've attended the meeting because they're interested in the subject and they want to hear from you. So a reframe is a big first step to helping people. Practicing, the more I do something, the more comfortable I get. I'm going to guess you probably, when you were a kid, learned how to ride a bike, or learned how to roller skate, or learned how to swim, something like that.
Yeah.
Were you good the first time you got on your bicycle?
No, not at all.
Probably fell a few times, right? Scrape
Yeah.
knees, elbows. Yeah, most of us do. So we can't expect that I'm going to automatically be great at something if I've never done it before. So we need to do some trial and error, practice in front of the mirror, create your own private group on Facebook where you can go live. No one else, you're the only one in the group. No one else has to hear it. Or create a video on your computer or your smartphone. You don't like it? Delete it. Nobody else has to see it. But it's the opportunity to practice and redo it, get better at it. We will not ever be perfect. Even the most seasoned speaker makes an occasional mistake. So don't try to be perfect, and don't let that stop you. Strive for excellence, yes, but not perfection. Those are my off the cuff tips right away.
Yeah, no, those are great. And I could relate to some of them myself, starting doing these recordings, and also just in general going in my job, for example, presenting in front of people and things like that. Yeah, those are, you feel embarrassed, you feel nervous and things like that. And yeah, I really like the suggestions that you made. So yeah, that's great. So then another thing is, you mentioned also with preparing, are there some like techniques or best practices on how to prepare the best for the public speaking?
So begin with the end in mind. What do you want your audience to do as a result of listening to you? What action do you want them to take? So if you're a leader of a team and you've got your weekly team meeting, what's the end goal? Is it you want to share information with people and they've got to act on a new process and they've got to learn the process? Or are you getting together simply because you want collegiality and people to get to know and cooperate better? But what's your end goal? If you are a coach or consultant, what do you want people to do as a result? Do you want them to subscribe to your list? Do you want them to sign up for your service or book a call with you? So what's your end game? So then you can backwards plan and be aware of time, Very few people say, oh gosh, I wish the meeting would have gone longer. No, what do people say? Man, that was way too long. They could have cut that. So be aware of your time. And that's where practice can come in, and play with it a little bit. So you start with the end in mind. You create some talking points, a few, 3 to 5. A lot of times people think, oh, I've got to share everything I know about this subject. No, 3 to 5 things is plenty. And then you can fill in. So when you think about stories and data, I want to create a story, not make up a story, but find a story, tell a story about my data that I'm trying to communicate. So I heard this, I was listening to actually a book on tape. Now I got to remember the name of it, The Perfect Story. And I can look the author up in just a second because I've got it on Audible. But she told a very impactful story about a quality manager in a construction company trying to get his people to listen to him. And he kept hammering away at the data. When he found a story outside of his industry about the failure of a company to listen to customer feedback and told the story to the group, it made such a difference. So that's what I would encourage people to think about is, how can I tell a relatable story? And it may or may not be within my business or in my industry, but creating information or telling information in a way that sticks with us, because we remember stories. We may never remember data. Think of all those tests that you took as a kid, and or maybe as an adult, right? Karen Eber, Eber, The Perfect Story is the book I was listening. Really good stuff. I recommend her. But all of those data points we had to memorize for tests. How many stick with you today? Maybe a couple. But when we are told a story, then and data is inserted into that story, we're more than likely going to remember it.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, that's a great point. And then another point you mentioned about practicing it. What are some of the techniques to practice it, to maybe memorize those facts or anything at all?
So again, if I have some 3 to 5 points and probably memorize those 3 to 5 points, but that's all I need to. I know that I can fill in what my end goal is, and I can fill in with stories and information. And if it doesn't come out exactly how I practiced it, okay, no one is going to know the difference, because no one knows what you are going to say before you say it. Maybe they have an idea and maybe they've heard you before. And there are speakers that tell the same stories. And so if you've heard that speaker before, you might hear that story again. Hey, that sticks with us. It's repetition, right? How we learn anything typically is repetition. So it's okay to tell the same story. You may change it up again. Maybe you change it for your audience, or maybe you change the perspective, but the key points in the story, the relevance of the story, that doesn't change. So the other thing I didn't say, and I think is important, is know your audience. Who are you talking to? So I had breakfast with someone this morning. We were talking about a particular group of people that I might want to get in front of. And she just gave me some good advice. And she said, the challenge is you are not a member of that community. You don't have that specific degree. And I'm like, yeah, I don't. And she said, because you don't, you probably will not be seen as credible. And credibility is huge. Even though I have a lot of experience and I have a lot of knowledge that I could potentially share with this group of people, I am not part of that in crowd. So knowing that is huge, is really helpful. And that was helpful to me to know that I probably it shouldn't pursue this group as an audience because of that. So know who your target is, know what they expect, and know what you can deliver.
Yeah, that's great. Another question I have regarding preparation is, many times after the speech is over, there are Q&A session. And
Yes.
sometimes it's very unpredictable. People may ask whatever they feel like they need to ask. How one can prepare for that?
So questions and answers can be challenging, especially if maybe you are newer to the field, or sometimes people kind of throw stuff out at you and try to trick you. I've seen that before. Telling the group, you know what? I'm so glad you asked that question. And right off the tip of my tongue, I don't have a great answer. But here's what I'd like you to do. Here's what I'd like to do. I want to do a little bit of research, and I want to get back to you if you know that person and have their contact information, or I want to get back to the meeting planner. So for example, if you're speaking to a group and you don't know all of them or don't have their contact information, the point person, the person who scheduled you to speak, I'm going to let them know and they'll disseminate the information. So I believe it is perfectly fine to be honest with your audience, because tell you what, if you try to make something up on the spot, they are going to see through you, and that ruins your credibility. So saying to the group, you know what, that's a great question, and I'm not sure right now I have a great answer, but let me do a little research and I'll get back with you.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
It's always better to be honest and maybe just get back to them and don't look kind of stupid.
I believe just honesty is the best policy. You know, there's a saying, fake it till you make it. I don't think that's a good idea, because people can see through that.
Yeah,
I believe they can.
Yeah, fake it until you make it is not applicable here. Maybe in some other places.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that people make in public speaking that you see?
We often use filler words, not just and ah. It took me a few times listening to my own recording and actually putting closed captions on it before I realized how often I began sentences with the word so. Just a language idiosyncrasy. Pauses are powerful, and don't be afraid of the pause or the silence. And if you do lose your train of thought, acknowledge it. Oh my goodness, I just kind of lost my place. It'll come back to me. Hold on. And you're silent for a moment. That silence can be deafening for you. Your audience will love you for it. They'll respect you for it, I believe. That's another filler, I believe. Thinking about the group at hand, knowing that audience, their expectations, and do they resonate with technical jargon? Every industry, every group has technical jargon. Just be careful of how often you use it. And I believe the simpler, the better. When I can, and people say dumb it down. I just think making it simple and easy so it's understandable. Now, I'm sure if you are at the collegiate level and you're a PhD and you're talking to other PhDs, your language might be more elevated. But for the rest of the world, the simpler the better, the clearer the better, the less jargon the better.
Yeah, that's great. I actually work in a government organization with a lot of scientists, and my first few months were really challenging, I should say, because I had to learn a lot of like medical and genetic stuff, and that's not something that I even read about since high school, probably. So that was kind of interesting. Yeah, so that's a great point there. Yeah.
Also, I would say check your assumptions about what the group is familiar with and what their expectations are. So if you're speaking to a group that maybe you've been asked to come in for a lunch and learn or something else, speak with the person who has asked you to give the presentation, get to know the group, get to know the company. Are there any things that are off limits, anything you shouldn't bring up, those kinds of things. And again, if you're a leader, know your people, know the expectations, but it's ultimately, what's the outcome? What's the result? What's the action I want the group to take?
Yeah. So also then, speaking about knowing your audience, how to engage your audience right there in the moment as you're doing presentation? Are there any tricks there?
So if you're on a call like Zoom or Google Meet or something, there are ways you can engage your audience using polls and whiteboards and those kinds of things. There's also some, I guess software would be the best term for Slido.com is another way, another method to engage your audience. I don't think it's Millimeter. There's a few of them that are not going to come to my brain right now, but thinking about how can I be more interactive if I'm in front of a group that's live, asking questions, getting feedback, having a dialogue with the audience. And sometimes we just ask a rhetorical question to get people thinking. Robert Cialdini wrote a book, I think in the 90s, about influence. And he has several principles about influence and getting your audience engaged, asking people if you're on Zoom or Google Meet, drop a 1 in the chat if you've ever lost your place in front of a group. Drop a 1 in the chat if you ever get butterflies in your stomach before you go out on stage. Those kinds of things to get the group thinking about, yeah, that's true for me. And then you can engage them in that way. So I believe audience engagement is a big part of what we want to do and get some interaction. If you are in person, even if you have a talk from a podium, you could ask your audience to turn to one another and just share a tidbit of information. The challenge is always getting them back if you do that. So you have to make it quick and you have to limit it. And you say, I'm going to give you 15 seconds on the clock, and mean it, right? Put a timer up, or maybe it's 60 seconds. Either way, getting them talking. And then you say, I'd love a few of you, 3 of you, being specific. I think being specific is better than just say a few, because a few could mean 2, 3, 5, 6. So I'm going to take 3 responses, or I'm going to go around the room and call on 4 groups. Whatever it is, be specific and let them know ahead of time the expectation.
Okay. Something just popped up to my head while you were talking. How long is the normal, but not normal, but the presentation? What is the best time frame, I guess, for the presentation?
A lot depends on again, number one, the goal, what you're trying to accomplish. But if we have many times team meetings, let's say, are 30 to 60 minutes, there's something about a standard hour. I would question, do we really need that much time? Because the meeting will expand to fill the time, typically. Now, that's not always 100% true, but oftentimes, especially if I don't have an agenda or it's just free flowing. Again, the host of the meeting or the person that invited you to come in will often have a time frame. So maybe you're giving a talk to a group that has invited you in for a lunchtime speaker. Those can vary. They're anywhere, I've found 20, 25 minutes to 45 or 50 minutes. Ask, get clarity. And if you are in line, sometimes they'll say, we're going to have 4 speakers and everybody gets 10 minutes. Well, if the person ahead of you runs over, guess what? Chances are your time is going to get cut short. So just be prepared for that and honor your fellow speakers by being prepared and staying within your time frame. Again, I don't think anybody says, oh gosh, I wish that meeting would have been longer. No, they say, oh, I wish that would have been short. Could have been so much better if it was shorter.
Yeah, for sure. And then sometimes people use some visuals during the presentations. How are they really helping digest information or pass on the message?
So be aware when you have a visual up there and it has words on it, people are reading those words, not necessarily listening to you. So your visuals should support your message. And the more I can have color and pictures and fewer words, so a picture goes a long way. So a supporting graphic, make sure they are legible. I've seen far too often in a big auditorium and the font is 6 or 8 or 10 point font. No one in the back of the room is going to be able to read that. So make sure it's legible and clear. And the other thing to think about with words is the font, very clean font, not a fancy font, not a scripty font. So people are wanting to read it. I don't know about you, but I've seen business signs and billboards that as you're zooming by on the highway, it's a little different, but still people want it to be legible and they're not. And it's like, what is that saying? I can't read that. So think about that. Make sure it matches, and the fewer slides, the better, in my opinion.
Are there any other types of visuals that can enhance presentations other than slides? Because maybe it's normal right now, but maybe you know of any other forms of visuals?
Well, I'm using maybe a video, as long as I have permission or it's not a copyrighted video, that can be to make it interactive. There's also, oh my gosh, there's 2 or 3 programs. Kahoot is one of the programs that you can interact with an audience, especially on a virtual meeting. There's a couple others. Kahoot is the one that is quickly coming to mind, but figuring out how I can make this interactive, and most have free versions. So we don't always have to use a slide deck with pictures. We can use other formats. So that's one.
Yeah. Okay.
Quizzes, I think, are popular. Asking people, gosh, do you think this is true or false? Playing those kinds of games, if you will, having some information that maybe people know, maybe they don't. So what do you think? Is it fact or fiction instead of true or false? I've used that before.
Yeah. Okay. Just change it up a little bit for people so it's more interesting, right?
Yeah, make it fun and have fun yourself. I think it's important to have fun. So now I've said half a dozen times, I think and I believe, and I'm the one talking. So that was not necessary at all.
That's okay. We're learning on our own mistakes.
Exactly.
Yeah. So then also during the presentation, sometimes maybe a difficult question come in or somebody just interrupt for whatever reason. How to handle those situations?
Hecklers and interrupters are challenging. Being polite, but being short and succinct. So, Vit, I appreciate your comment. Thank you very much. I don't have time to get into that right now, but tell you what, after the meeting's over, let's connect and I'll get you the information, or I'll see what you can do. But be polite, but don't let them take over. And that can be challenging. I remember the first time I had someone in my audience who was kind of a heckler and wanted to point out where I was wrong. And I had to just very kindly but firmly say, Apparently, we disagree on these few points, and I appreciate you bring that up. But let's chat afterwards. Meet me afterwards and we'll talk about it. And they finally quieted down. But I had to say that, I think, if I remember right, it was about 3 times.
Oh, wow. Yeah, sometimes people really stubborn.
Yes, sometimes
Yeah,
they do. And so
yeah,
you just, let it roll off your back. Avoid taking it personally, because they probably will do that to any speaker that's there. It's okay. No big deal.
yeah,
Remember, the audience wants to hear from you and your message, not necessarily that other person. And I think sometimes people just, I don't know, they want the attention to be to them, and they want to make a point and get, just let them be. Don't worry about it. Move on, but be polite, but be firm.
yeah. I guess the reason I'm asking this question is I want people to be aware of situations like that, and be kind of prepared for this, that this will happen to everybody, and just know how to deal with it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so you talked about making stories to make the message more memorable. Are there other techniques than stories uh, to make more memorable the message, or whatever topic is?
Well, I would begin to keep a story journal, making making notes about what's happened to you, different events, things you can think about. Maybe spend time once a week, setting aside 30 minutes, thinking back through what would make a good story, how could I make a point. But keeping a story journal, the gentleman who, I know I can't think of his name, or the moth, is a speaking I don't know that competition is the right word. I guess it is. And he was a school teacher. So in his book, he gives homework for life, and he tells people, start an Excel file, and at the end of the day, review your day, think about a couple of stories, a couple of points, make a note. The beauty of Excel is it's searchable, and then you can have a record of that. So if I need a story about a time where I made a mistake, but it turned out all right, or a time where I was asked to give some information and I didn't have it at my fingertips, or I don't know, I'm just trying to make things up off the top of my head about what could be in your stories. The other resource that I like to use are other people's stories. Now, here's the thing. You cannot make them your own, but you could give an example. So one story that quickly comes to mind, and people are probably familiar with this, the number of times that Abraham Lincoln failed throughout his career.
Mm-hmm.
But also, did you know that Decca Records turned down the Beatles because they said, when they were approached back in the early 60s, oh, we don't like their sound and guitar music is on their way out. Wow, big mistake on their part. So finding some little factoids like that to cement your point, or support or augment your point, takes a little bit of research, but it's doable. I think Reader's Digest is another great resource and great tool to find information. The beauty of AI today, too, is you can put in a prompt that will just give you all kinds of information.
Yeah, yeah. I guess instead of giving the whole story for 5 minutes, you can find those little nuggets of information that are really catchy and interesting, plugging them in. Yeah, that's a great one. I was more thinking maybe also something for like triggering some emotion, but I guess those fall into the same category. They can, they can trigger emotion. Why not?
Well,
Yeah.
and so again, that to me is, what do I want as a result of this? And do I want to get people excited about this opportunity? Or do I want them to be more thoughtful and more reflective? What's my end goal? And what's the emotion that I can create? We as humans like to think we are creatures of logic. We are, in fact, creatures of emotion. And we make decisions emotionally, and then we back them up with facts and logic. But we want to engage people emotionally, first and foremost, then with the data, then with the facts. But tell me a story, engage me, and then you can give me the supporting information.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's a good formula. Yeah. So let's talk about interviews, like job interviews, for example. So when you are being asked a difficult question on interview, or maybe you don't know how to answer it correctly, are there some tactics how to kind of maybe play it a little bit or answer it in the right way that people don't think you don't know anything at all?
Yeah. Well, the question that most people dislike is the question, tell me about yourself. Well, what do you want to know? There's a lot. But being prepared, thinking through, again, with AI, if I'm going to be interviewing at a chemical company for the head of accounting, let's just make up a story. What might some questions be? Now, if you're the head of accounting or interviewing for that position, you've got a long history. What has been my experience thinking about stories? Oftentimes they'll say, tell me about a time when you made a mistake that cost the company money. Or tell me about a time when you didn't get along with a fellow employee. Or tell me about a time when a customer got angry with you, or something along those lines. So thinking about it in terms of a challenge and then my response, but what happened as the outcome. We want to tell the potential employer about how I turned the situation around, or at the very least, what I learned from that situation so I knew I would not make that mistake again. We all have made mistakes if we've had a career of any length. So I believe it's helpful to own up to them, but no, here's the lesson I learned. Here's what I would do differently. Here's what I would never do again. Those kinds of stories resonate and are helpful. But thinking through. So again, what kind of questions should I be probably put into whatever Chat GPT or whatever you're using? Give them a prompt that says, you're the employer, you're the HR person, you're the head of whatever, and I'm got this credential, and what are the top 10 toughest interview questions I could be asked? So then you can prepare some answers.
Yeah, I really like this idea because I think most people naturally first thing trying to show off their skill or show off what they achieved or whatnot, but just being honest and saying, you know what, I was in this situation, I screwed up a little bit, but now I know how to deal with it. I didn't know back then. It's good, it should be good enough for most reasonable people, right? Yeah.
Well, I think because we've been verbal, most people have been verbal their whole life. They've been talking since they learned how to talk. And so there's a fallacy that says, I don't need to prepare for that interview. I don't need to prepare for that. I can just wing it. Please, if you want to get the job, take the time to have a thoughtful response. I've had this once in a group interview. The candidate came in with a list of questions she thought would be asked and her answers, obviously, to those. And so when the time came for us to say, well, what questions do you have for us? She was prepared with, well, there's some things that I thought for sure you would ask me that you didn't. Would you like to know this information? Long story short, she got the job.
Well, yeah, I would say so. I've never heard that one
Yeah.
on the job interview. That's great. And then what about the body language? I guess it applies to the stage speaking as well. How in general to like control and maybe, practice a little bit that you don't like. I have this problem. I always have to hold something in my hand. But
Well, be aware of whatever you hold in your hand, because a pen, a rubber band, a paper clip, hands free, if you will. Take anything out of your hand. Paper especially. It's noisy, can be noisy on the microphone.
mm-hmm.
Handshake, I think, is a huge, if I am in person, face to face, and I'm going to shake somebody's hand, meet me here. Please don't just grab my fingertips. I don't practice your handshake. You don't have to grip, right? It doesn't have to be a death grip on somebody's hand, but have a nice firm grip and a couple of pumps. That's sufficient. If you are on stage, move, but move with purpose. So the best thing I can tell people, whether you're seated or standing, whether you're on camera or in person, is keep your feet flat on the floor. Pull your energy up through your feet and through your body. Avoid pacing. And I've seen highly paid people pace the platform. If you watch any number of TED Talks, you'll see a variety of people doing a variety of different things. But I believe the most powerful speakers are the speakers who stand with their feet flat on the floor, lean in to make a point, lean back, know how to work the stage, and move with purpose. They avoid pacing back and forth, either across or diagonal. Well, that's not diagonally, but back and forth, either way. You're much more powerful if you are holding a tall spine and strong position, feet a little bit apart, so you have a nice strong base, and then you move with purpose. People often say to me, what do I do with my hands when I'm speaking? Comfortably by your side, or if you're on camera, on your lap, generally speaking. Now you might make a point, and you've seen me today use my hands to make a point. Just be aware of body language and your facial expressions, looking at the camera, practice smiling. Smiling, I believe, makes a difference. Nobody wants a grumpy face. A lot of people, when they're serious, again, I have to be aware. Watch yourself. Create a video. Have someone stage an interview with you on Zoom. Give them the questions you think might be asked and practice a few times. You will, number one, be much more comfortable on the interview and better prepared.
Yeah. So I have this, not analogy, but example, like people who play poker, for example, there is expression poker face that don't show your emotions, be focused on one thing that you're doing, versus in public speaking, should you show those emotions? Should be you like move and be more live? What do you think is a better approach?
If I'm doing a presentation, that might be a little bit different from an interview. And again, I'm thinking of, there's a few professions where they don't necessarily want you to be animated. Maybe that's an accountant, maybe that's an engineer, maybe that's an attorney. I'm not certain. However, if I'm engaging an audience, you want vocal variety, you want facial expressions, you want to use your body appropriately. Even in an interview, I think you want to be a bit animated and show your personality. You don't want to show up on a job having to be substantially different than the person they hired. Generally speaking, interviews are not a great way to hire, but that's what we use. There's a lot better ways to know if the person is going to be a good fit and do the job besides the interview. And many companies have a variety of ways that they can tell that. So I don't want to disparage interviews or HR people. However, that being said, I want to be a little animated. I want to share a little story, have some vocal variety. Because if I'm going to sit like this the entire interview and not move my face, not look in the camera, and look in the camera, and for sure have your camera on, that probably goes without saying. Yet I am amazed at all the meetings I get on. They're not interviews. People will not come on camera. I don't know if you're there. I don't know who you are. I want to see you. I want to interact with you. I want to, at the very least, make eye contact with you. And so while we're on this topic, being aware of your eyes on the camera level, looking at your audience as opposed to up or down. I was in a meeting not too long ago with a gentleman whose camera was sideways. So you saw his profile, nice profile. But if I'm in a meeting with you and we're at a conference room table, chances are we're going to look each other eyeball to eyeball most of that time, not profile. So think about those things and be prepared. Also, if it's a Zoom or virtual, I'll just say virtual meeting, what happens if my cable suddenly disappears, my internet connection suddenly disappears, the power suddenly goes out? We were a half an hour before this call, I got a warning that there was a potential for a thunderstorm. Now, it has not happened. I'm thinking it went south of me, but I had to be prepared and know that if I lost power for whatever reason, I was going to have a game plan. I was going to have a backup plan, and I could get on my phone and we could complete this interview.
Okay. Yeah, it's good to be prepared in those cases. Yeah.
What's the word? I mean, plan for the worst, hope for the best. Kind of a trite, but
Yeah.
thinking about what could happen and how will I recover. If I've thought about that worst case scenario and have a plan in my head and know that this is what I will do in case of that, I can be calm and cool and collected as opposed to panicking if that moment should arise.
Yeah. In project management, we say plan for the worst and hope for the best. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
So if somebody still nervous and they practice, they prepared, they have everything, but they still naturally just a little bit more nervous person, are there any tricks how to, because I know from my experience, it only happens in the first like 5 minutes, and past that you got into the game and it's kind of going and you're less nervous. Are there any things to quickly overcome those nervous first 5 minutes?
If I have a pre-presentation routine that can circumvent some of that, that includes breathing. So practicing the boxed breathing or 4-part breath, I've heard it called a number of things. You're inhaling to the count of 4, holding your inhale for 4, exhaling to the count of 4, and holding your exhale for 4 or 6 counts. If I hold my exhale a little bit longer, I can drop my heart rate effectively. So that nervous energy I feel inside me, I can release that a little bit as I enter the room, if it's a conference room, or if it's a Zoom room or Google Meet, whatever the platform is. Before I enter, I've done some preparation. That I don't know if you've ever seen Amy Cuddy's TED Talk on power poses. She's a Harvard professor. She talks about a couple, Wonder Woman. So your feet are a little bit more than hip width apart. Your hands are on your hips. You're like Wonder Woman, right? Before she takes off. Or somebody who wins a race, the first person to cross that tape, where do their arms go? Up above their head. So she calls it Superman. Think about Superman flying through the sky. Spending a couple of minutes in a pose like that can help you feel more powerful. You do some breathing exercises along with that, so you're focused and you're centered, and what you tell yourself. So telling yourself the story that, and it's really not a story. Our brain believes whatever we tell it. So if we tell it we're a flop, we're going to be awful, guess what? We're going to be a flop and we're going to be awful. But if we tell it, you've got this, you will be amazing, you are going to impress the socks off those people, you will, in fact, do that. So rehearsing those words of confidence before I go out, and make it a routine. Make it a daily practice to tell yourself you are amazing, you've got this. Adopt what Mel Robbins calls the high five habit. Every morning you look in the mirror and you give yourself a high five. You got this. You got it going on. Look in the mirror and tell yourself, I love you. You're amazing. When we look in the mirror, what do we often say? Oh no, where did that new wrinkle come from? Oh my gosh, is that a gray hair? Do I have a pimple? No, none of that. Look at yourself and tell yourself how amazing you are, because in fact you are. You are the only one, the only of you there ever will be. How cool is that? I mean, think about it. In the history of the universe, there's only going to be one Lyoshin. Nobody else is ever going to be you.
Yeah, that's great. I think those little rituals people will help people overcome this first nervous moment, and then it just goes. It's like with everything, right? Just have to start, and then it's fine.
Like Nike says, just do it. Get started. I don't care where you are. Everyone starts somewhere.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit to social media. How to engage with people when it's not real time in a meeting, in a conference. It has some gap in time. So what are some of the best practices there?
Well, the log algorithms keep changing. So I'm not the best person to speak about that, but I would say showing up on a consistent basis, whatever that is for you. So, for example, my YouTube channel, I post a video every Tuesday, along with some other shorts, but every Tuesday there's going to be a video that'll show up in my subscribers' inboxes. On LinkedIn or Facebook, it is more frequent than that. And thinking about what's my strategy, again, what's my goal, and what value can I provide? So who's my audience? What do they need to hear from me? What do they want to hear from me? What problem can I solve for them? How can I add value to their lives? And that's the message I want to share. And will people always respond? No. Because I don't get a like, does that matter? No. I had a comment from somebody the other day, not someone who is my ideal fit client, but someone who has connected with me. We're connected on Facebook, and just told me that they appreciated my messages and that I was impacting them. I was really shocked that, number one, I was thrilled that they would reach out. Now, the opposite is also true. People might not reach out to you directly, but they'll make a nasty remark. Celebrate it. Celebrate that troll. I believe that's what they call them. And be kind. Acknowledge it, but move on. Can't spend a lot of time there. Gosh, looks like we have a difference of opinion. Thanks so much for bringing that to my attention. And that's all you need to say. And if they persist, you've got to be politely persistent. Now, you can remove them, avoid them, those kinds of things, but usually it's a one and done. At least it's been my experience that way.
Yeah.
The biggest thing about social media, I think, is who am I wanting to attract? What's the message that I can share that's impactful for them? What's the value I bring to the table? And how can I consistently provide that value?
Yeah, that's great. That summarizes it. Okay, well, we're coming to an end here. And at the end, I just wanted to give you a chance to share any advice that you would like to share, maybe something we haven't discussed yet today.
Well, I just said, and I would repeat myself, everyone starts somewhere. Just start. Find a mentor, someone that you admire, that you can emulate, if you will, not copy, but see what they're doing, what might be working for them, and follow in their footsteps, if you will. I also believe in coaches. I have a coach. Most every coach I know has a coach. So if you want to get better at something, having someone who will challenge you professionally, give you some honest feedback, and practice, just enjoy the process of practicing, embrace that. No athlete loves the workout. At least they don't talk about, yeah, I loved doing those laps. I loved doing those free throws. I loved doing those wind sprints. No, but they did them. I think it was Muhammad Ali that talked about the fight is won on those early morning road works and all those things you see people that you don't see people that are behind the scenes. You only see what happens in the ring or on the court or on the ball field. It's all that preparation that led up to that moment, but that preparation is so important, and that will make the difference.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a very good motivational ending for this episode. Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you very much for your time. It
My
was
pleasure.
really great, a wealth of knowledge here. So I hope we can talk more in the future.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. It was great to chat with you.
Yeah, same here. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.